So basically this is a tale of how I kind of accidentally ended up starting a charity. It was definitely not in a life goal or something. I didn't start off, okay, right, so, go to school, go to university, become a teacher, start a charity and have intense amounts of responsibility for hundreds of children for the rest of my life. But somehow that seems to be what I've ended up doing. So this is the charity that just over 12 years ago now, I helped to co-found out in Uganda. And it's called S.A.L.V.E for short, because that's the balm that you put on a wound. But it stands for Support and Love via Education. And we work with children who are living on the streets of Uganda and help them to leave the streets and be able to go home to their families, rejoin education and have a brighter future, basically. So an important question to start off thinking about for all of us is, how far have you ever had to carry a chicken? That's why I'd like to apologise. This is the mushroom haircut incident that happened in my youth, but let's just look beyond that. My answer to that question is around 6 hours on 4 forms of public transport where it pooed all over my foot. But this is a chicken that I was given by a very, very grateful grandmother because we'd returned her grandson home to her that she thought she was never going to see again. And she was a chicken farmer, so the only thing she felt she could do to appreciate that was to give me a chicken. Of course, I'm a vegetarian. But I carried that chicken all the way back and gave it to the other children, and I don't think that chicken lasted very long. So basically, S.A.L.V.E came about because of this quite simple idea, really, that there should be no street called home. No one anywhere in the world should have to live on the streets. And it particularly affected me and got to me seeing children as young as 5 recently living on the streets, and you just feel like you need to do something about that. So, street life in Uganda, it's a bit warmer and sunnier than it is here in Manchester, I'm not going to lie. But if you ask the kids, the thing that most bothers them, most upsets them, that is constantly on their mind is food. If anyone here, we've all been teenagers, right? But if anyone here is currently living with a teenager, you will know that food is definitely the only thing on their mind. But of course, if you're living on the streets, you've got no guarantee of where your next meal is going to come from. So that means you do a lot of hard work. So in Uganda, children are essentially the recycling system. You can see them going through this rubbish skip here. You look for scrap metal, you look for plastic bottles, anything you can find that you can sell. A whole sack of plastic bottles, you can get 1.5, 2p equivalent for that. And that will have taken you all day to look for that. While you're on the streets, people are telling you, you're worthless, you're a drug addict, you're a thief, like, you're a waste of space, you're a bad child. Get out of here. And you're scared. You can't go to sleep unless your friend is watching out for you. Or if you do go to sleep, it's not that proper deep sleep, you kind of always have to be a little bit on edge, a little bit ready to run. And so a lot of the kids turn to drugs. Sadly, I didn't bring a plastic bottle with me, but if you can just imagine with my cup, you get a rag, you soak it in aeroplane fuel, you put it in your bottle, and you sniff. A hit of mafuta costs you 200 Ugandan shillings. A plate of food costs you 2,000 Ugandan shillings. The drugs stop you from feeling hungry. What are you going to choose? So I've known kids as young as 8, heavily addicted to drugs. So, again, I'm very, very young in these pictures, aren't I? So at the age of 23, I'd gone out to Uganda to work with an education charity. I'd graduated university, I'd gone on to become a teacher, and decided I wanted to give something back. So I went out to Uganda to work with an education charity. And while I was there, I met these 2 incredible people, Helen and Mike, and we saw there was a problem. We saw the number of kids on the streets. Mike himself actually lived on the streets when he was a child, and he went on to become a trained counsellor. He's Ugandan. And so we decided, okay, there's a problem, we need to do something about it. We've got the passion to do something about it. We have a few coins, not very much money at all, but let's do what we can. So we rented our first S.A.L.V.E house. We couldn't even afford bed frames at this point, but we bought some mattresses, put them on the floor, and we got going. So what led me to that point? I was actually partially deaf when I was younger. The stirrup bone in my left ear didn't used to vibrate properly. So I did kind of grow up in the education system, always feeling a little bit on the outside, always feeling a little bit like it wasn't quite for me, but also ridiculously painfully shy. The absolute worst thing I could possibly imagine in my life was standing up in front of a group of people. Oops. So, as a result of that, I thought, okay, I was very lucky. My bones started vibrating a bit better in my ear. I started hearing better. Still not 100%, but a lot better. And I got a good education. I thought, right, I need to push myself out of my comfort zone. I've been kind of trapped in this sense of who I was as this shy, partially deaf girl on the edge of things. Let me become a teacher and let me go out there in the world and see what I can do. And I'd also started seeing a lot of inequality in the world and thinking, right, like a bit, I guess like what Chris was saying earlier, I need to kind of do something about it, but I don't know what I want to do. So this is what led me to Uganda. This is what led me to be in that place where we started S.A.L.V.E. And then after that, this is what led me to places like Oxfam and the Club Social Leadership Programme, so I could learn how do you run a charity? Because we kind of did it a little bit backwards by getting started first, and then learning how to do it all second. But we're still here 12 years later, so hopefully we're doing all right. So just in a kind of whistle-stop tour of what we now do as a charity. So we started with that very first house that you saw, and now we've kind of expanded to become almost like a miniature social services in the local area, just because basically every time you find another gap, someone's like, well, we could do something about that. And you're like, well, sure, why not? Let's give it a try, see how we get on. So we have an incredible team of Ugandan social workers who are out there, day in, day out, day and night, building trusting relationships with these kids. So like I said, the kids are being told they're worthless, they're literally being spat on, kicked, people throw things at them. So the first thing we've got to do is convince them they can trust us. And why would they trust you? You're some random stranger. So we play games, we spend time with them in their spaces. That picture, we actually playing volleyball. They're normally always playing football, and I'm forever trying to convince them there are other sports. I've also been told off very many times for living in Manchester and not knowing all the footballers. So if anyone has any connections for me, let me know, because that'll get me out of trouble. So you may have noticed in these pictures it's mainly boys. We have girls on the streets as well, but they're often much more hidden. So this is the biggest rubbish dump outside of Ginger, where we're working. And if you can imagine the smell, like, it smells probably 10 times worse than what you're imagining right now. It's horrible. There are needles, there's all sorts of horrible, horrible things in this rubbish. And many of the girls spend their days going through this rubbish pile, trying to get stuff they can sell so they can eat. However, I had a 14, 15-year-old girl tell me she wasn't sure which was worse, going through this or selling herself. Those were her two choices. So we exist to try and give a different choice. After we've gained the trust of children on the streets, we have a beautiful 5-acre site just outside of Ginger, and here we have what we call our halfway homes. So they're places where kids can come heal, basically. If you can see here, we have more mangoes than you can possibly imagine. Playground, football pitch, classrooms, library, and it just gives the kids a chance to be kids again, and also to learn how to live in a home again, because if you've been on the streets for a while, you're not used to that, and prepare them for going back home. We also have a special centre for young people who are addicted to drugs. We started this in 2017 because we saw that these young people were getting stuck on the streets. There wasn't anything for them. They couldn't come through the normal programme. They needed something special. Their self-confidence after taking drugs for so many years is so low. I've literally had young people come in and bring another child and say, this kid's new on the streets, you need to help them. And you ask, do you not need help as well? No, I'm no good, I'm not worth it. Help my friend. So we also think they need help as well. So we've designed this service especially to try and make sure there's something for all the young people. And once a young person's gone through drug rehab, or the halfway homes, in all this time we're talking with them about where could they go home. So if they ran away from a certain situation, you try and find out what was the reason why. Some of my team, they say they feel a bit like they're detectives, in a way, of you dig in and trying to understand what caused that young person to come to the streets. So what can we do about that? If it's poverty, you can do something about poverty. If it's abuse or neglect, you're probably not going to put that young person back into that home, but you can look within the wider family. How's things with grandma, grandpa, uncle, auntie? Is there a neighbour that looked after you when you were growing up that you've just got that really close tie with? And then we can start working with that family and see if we can take the kids home. And since we started in 2008, we've now resettled more than 400 children back to their families all over Uganda. And actually, to be honest, not just Uganda, we've actually taken young people back to Kenya and South Sudan as well. Because, wherever someone's family is, they say east or west, home is the best, right? You need to help them to go home. We also are strong believers in education. You can take a young person home, but what future have they got? Education will give them the chance to build their own future, to make their dreams come true, so they can tell their own tales to inspire. And an education that means something to them. We have young people now building playgrounds, going to school. Actually, one of our lads was on the radio this weekend on Sunday. He was invited on a local radio because of the circumstances he'd gone through, and he got some of the best O-level results in the country. And that's amazing, isn't it? So, these young people, they're what inspires me and makes me keep going. It's not enough to work with young people. It's like we said, poverty could be a reason that pushed them out of their home. So if poverty was what pushed them out of their home, and yet it's a loving and good home, you've got to do something about poverty. So we've also started a business training program, and to date we've now helped more than 120 families start their own small businesses so that they can keep their kids at home as well. And from there, like we said, the young people also, they are being discriminated against. There is a lot of negativity towards them, so we look for ways and opportunities to help them, to raise their voices, to share their stories. Personally, I don't think my tale is that inspiring compared to what most of these young people have gone through. And if it was possible for one of them to come and stand in front of you, I think that would be way more interesting than me talking to you today. So, this is a day that always, I think, will stay with me, and I just wanted to share this story with you as well. On the same day, two young people, so this lad here and this little girl, just happened to be ready to go home. They're both from different families, from completely opposite sides of Uganda, and two of our amazing social workers set off Again, you're talking like hours and hours on public transport, literally to the point of wading through rivers and all sorts of very interesting journeys people have gone through to get these young people home. And they both arrived at these family homes, and they both found those families preparing the funerals for their children. And they were both able to stop those funerals and bring these families back together. And I think that's always going to be, so far, like one of the things that's touched me most in the work that I've done. You can see for the little girl, no one would let her feet touch the ground. They said for like more than 2-3 hours, because they were just all so excited to have her back. He's a little bit of a bigger lad. I'm sure if they could have all carried him, they would have done. But you know, this is what S.A.L.V.E means to me. This is what the work we're doing means to me. It's about bringing families back together and giving people hope. So I want to take us back to my earlier question. How far will you carry a chicken? I've carried one for 6 hours. It wasn't something I set out to do. It was something that kind of found me along the way. I happened to meet the right people. I happened to see a situation that I thought I could make a difference in. And I decided, well, do you know what? I'm going to do something about it and see what happens. And this is me 12 years later. How far are you willing to go? At S.A.L.V.E, we could do with all the help we could possibly get. We're going to have a lovely stand just over here. If you feel you'd like to get more involved, we would absolutely love to have you. Everyone's got a skill they can share. Everyone's got something they can offer. Please come talk to us. I honestly do believe we can create a world where there's no street called home. But to do that, we need to build a movement of people who genuinely believe it. So please come talk to us afterwards, and we'd love to share more with you.